Vanessa Doyle is a wedding planner and recently turned author of the latest wedding book guide, Tying the Knots, a one-stop shop for all things weddings. The recent career change comes after she has planned 234 weddings, including weddings for her younger sisters, her friends, and her parents' vow renewal, but none for herself. As she admires her book, placed majestically in a wedding store, she strikes up a conversation with a lady admiring a gorgeous wedding dress. Vanessa is excited when she finds out that the lady is newly engaged. She seizes the opportunity to increase sales as she pitches Tying the Knots to her and offers to sign a copy for her. Eager to advertise her book, she and her partner Jill decide to organize a contest to sponsor a couple's wedding for free. Reviewing applications from several contestants is an arduous process that keeps Vanessa late at the office even when others have gone home. She comes across an inspiring submission from a couple that melts her heart. She is overcome with emotions at finding their winning couple. She calls Jill to share the good news with her. When she realizes how late it is, she apologizes and promises to give her the gist the next day at work. Vanessa arrives at work the next morning, bright and cheery. Over coffee, she shares with Jill the heartwarming story of the couple, Amy, a grad school student, and Scott, a wounded army guy. The ladies are both excited about the adventure. Sales have been sluggish and they can't wait to plan the wedding, which they believe will boost their website and increase sales of the book. During the conference call with the excited couple, Amy announces that they have limited time and would like to have their wedding in 5 weeks. Vanessa is shocked at the short time to prepare for the wedding. She covers up her shock and promises Amy and Scott the wedding of their dreams at their preferred charming wedding cottage in Stony Bridge, Vermont. After the call, Vanessa expresses her worry about the short time, but Jill assures her that things will work out fine. After all, they have accomplished more within a shorter time. They swing into planning, but Vanessa hits a brick. The wedding cottage is unreachable via calls and email, and rumors have it that they are closed. Left with no other option, Vanessa decides to head to Stony Bridge and see how to get into contact with the owner of the cottage. It is a must that the wedding goes according to plan as her business. In another scene, we see Evan, famous sculptor and owner of the wedding cottage. He receives a call from his excited art collector, Roland, who scores a spot for him at the Uber Rich Collective show happening soon. Evan doesn't sound excited about the opportunity. He is facing a temporary lack of inspiration, and the quiet walls of the wedding cottage have unfortunately failed to inspire him. Annoyed at Roland for trying to force his hands, he reluctantly agrees to come up with something before the show. His peace and quiet are disturbed when Vanessa shows up at the cottage. Vanessa is stunned to see the cottage in such bad shape. It has been overgrown with weeds and shrubs covering everywhere. A different picture from what she has in her book guide. It looks obvious that the owners have no plans of keeping it open for business. But Vanessa is not to be deterred as she continues to knock on the door. She jumps when Evan walks up behind her, curious to know what she is looking for. She finds it difficult to believe that the monstrosity is the famous wedding cottage, but Evan doesn't have the patience to argue with her. He explains to her about the futility of her journey. The wedding cottage was last run by his grandparents. According to Evan, Vanessa is 5 years too late to host a wedding in the cottage. But Vanessa is insistent on working something out with him. This gets on Evan's nerves more. He informs her for the umpteenth time that the wedding cottage is closed before he walks off, leaving Vanessa gaping like a fish. What a grouch, she thinks. She rants to her friend, Jill, about Evan. She takes a peek into the cottage to figure out the work needed on it. She finds her way to Evan's place behind the cottage. He is annoyed to cross paths with her again. She explains her situation to him and proposes the idea of repairing the cottage at her expense. Evan is as resolute as a rock as he doesn't agree with her plans. He even considers calling the sheriff for her. Defeated, Vanessa trudges to her car and drives to Stony Bridge's B&B. She meets the owner, Marilyn Sherwood, and they get to talk about the cottage. Marilyn has heard about the shutdown of the wedding cottage, especially since she knew how precious it was to her friend, Evan's grandmother. The cottage holds a special place in the town's heart as many people, including Marilyn, had their weddings in it. She is more than happy to help Vanessa work things out with Evan. The next morning, Vanessa arrives early at the wedding cottage and waylays Evan with coffee and some cookies as a peace offering. Evan is surprised that she is undeterred. He calls her peace offering a bribe, but Vanessa denies the accusation. She continues being a pest to Evan from where she stopped the other day. She makes a darn good argument that forces Evan to make a decision. At this point, her voice is grating to his ears. He reluctantly agrees to her idea just to stop her from talking down the cottage. He agrees to allow her to start repairs on the cottage, but on the condition that she supervises the working crew to avoid too much noise. Coffee every morning also sounds like a nice addition to the mix. Vanessa is overcome by excitement. She cuts a very funny figure making weird movements that look like both jumping and dancing. Things start to look up for the wedding plans. Vanessa hears from Jill that the couple has chosen a theme for their wedding. It's time to start preparations for the renovations, but she is disappointed when Neil from the hardware store informs her that 1 month is too short to get all the work done. It's Vermont and not New York City after all. With Vermont's best contractors' details in hand and a few other local vendors contacted, things begin to look up for Vanessa. She learns a bit of the cottage's history from Marilyn, who's too happy to share some of her knowledge. Vanessa is crushed that Evan doesn't plan to keep the cottage with so much history open, but both women believe that he must have some affection for it since he has no plans of selling it. In the next scene, Vanessa arrives at Evan's favorite restaurant for dinner and she finds him there. He suspects her of stalking him, but she denies it. Since they are both alone, they decide to dine together. Neil stops at their table and Vanessa thanks him for introducing her to Darrell, the contractor who has promised to send over a crew the next day. Evan is surprised at the amount of work she has done in a day, but she informs him that it's all part of her job. She asks him about his work. He is fidgety and she gets the impression that all is not so cool in his world. But who is she to say? The construction crew arrives the next day to begin work. She is unhappy with the loud noise coming from their machines as she doesn't want Evan disturbed. Darrell calms her down and informs her that Evan is too far off to be disturbed by their noise. Although there's enormous work to be done on the cottage, Darrell assures her that everything will end well. But the backyard filled with leaves says otherwise. She tries to use the leaf blower but is surprised at the noise it makes. The noise rouses Evan, who's unsuccessfully playing a game in a book. Artist's block, is that you? He fears for her safety and tries to show her how to wield the heavy machine, but she cuts a funny figure blowing at the leaves. Tired of correcting her, Evan leaves her to her shenanigans while she continues to have fun. Evan returns to his workshop to continue with his doodling. He destroys yet another sketch on the floor. Unfortunately, his creative juices are still missing and his floor has enough evidence to show. Back at the cottage, Vanessa has Evan try some of the lunch she got for the crew from the restaurant he frequents. She is impressed when Evan helps her fix a leak from the kitchen sink using his work tools. Wonders of having a handy sculptor. Vanessa is surprised when Jill informs her that Evan is famous in the art world. Her perception of him slightly changes as she gets to know him better. Jill teases her about how cute Evan is, while she hints at a romance between the two, but Vanessa stops her in her tracks. Her priority is to plan a successful wedding for their couple and not to get involved with the grouchy artist, even though things are getting better between them. In the woods behind the cottage for some wildflowers inspiration for the wedding, Vanessa runs into Evan and mistakes him for a moose. She hits him with a stick but apologizes when she realizes her mistake. He is disappointed when he learns that her exploration is for her work and not for herself. He wishes that Vanessa will take a break and explore the beautiful scenery around the cottage. Vanessa is embarrassed when she finds herself telling Evan about how unhappy she is planning others' weddings while she remains single. He is a good sport about it but is curious about why she is single. Vanessa claims to be a perfectionist in her work life and this has also affected her relationships. She asks about his relationships too. Evan admits to her that he is divorced and that his marriage didn't last, all thanks to his work. He heaps much blame on himself for the failure of his marriage because of too much focus on his art. He seems to have learned from his mistakes now. He is all about taking things easy, taking long walks, and enjoying life the Vermont way. She gets some good news from Jill. The good people from Good Day America, after lots of unsuccessful attempts, have agreed to show up for the wedding. Vanessa is excited at the news, one less task ticked off the list. She meets with Amy and they go wedding dress shopping. The young lady practically has no one except her grandparents, so Vanessa steps in just like a fairy godmother. Amy appears in a divine wedding dress. She is excited and gets emotional as she thanks Vanessa for helping her out through the process. Amy mentions to her that her grandparents can't wait to see the cottage again, several decades after they got married there. Vanessa is forced to cover up as if everything were already in place with the cottage. She doesn't have the heart to tell Amy the true state of things in the cottage. She is focused on giving her the wedding of her dreams just like she promised. On her drive back to Stony Bridge, Darrell calls her with some awful news. The attic is filled with a family of raccoons, and without having it cleared up, work on the cottage has to stop. This doesn't go down well with Vanessa. They will get behind schedule for the wedding. On the other hand, Evan is at loggerheads with his art collector Roland. He doesn't even have a sketch to show, several months after holing up in Vermont. And with the exhibition in 2 weeks, Roland is on his neck for anything at all. But what's he gonna do? Inspiration seems to be enemies with him. He storms out of his house and rides off on his bicycle, apparently to cool off. Unknowingly, Vanessa goes to his cottage to share some of her delicious maple pecan blondies, made by Darrell's wife. She meets an empty house and goes snooping, albeit innocently. She admires some beautiful paintings which she finds in the room. Evan returns, frightening the bejesus out of her, yet for the third time since they met. This must be part of his love language or something. He jokingly accuses her of being sent by his art dealer to snoop on him. She hands him the blondie cakes and tries to find out from him why he is wary of his art dealer. She is surprised when he tells her that he is stuck despite his talents. She admits that she Googled him and knows how awesome his work is. But Evan sounds anything but awesome at the moment. He seems to be tired of doing the same type of art that he is known for, angry, young, and anti-establishment. He yearns for something else. Vanessa suggests he does something that signifies Vermont, just like the paintings scattered all over the room. She picks up a sculpture piece made by Evan in his first year at art school. It's made of wood gotten from one of his walks in the woods behind the cottage. Vanessa's interest is piqued by the piece. They stare at each other longingly for what seems like a lifetime but is just a few seconds. Vanessa breaks their stare and announces her need to go back to work. She leaves and Evan continues to stare at her back. The next day, Vanessa is relieved when the guys from the wildlife agency take care of the raccoons. Her plans can at least pick up from where they stopped. But her joy is cut short when she receives a text that the couple is on their way to Stony Bridge to have a look at the wedding cottage before their big day. She is not ready to come clean with the true state of things with the cottage. She relays her concerns to Evan and he swings into action, ready to help her out. They devise a plan to stall the couple's plan. Marilyn from the B&B also agrees to join them in their plans. She comments on the blossoming friendship between Vanessa and Evan, but Vanessa in her usual manner waves it off. Vanessa meets the couple in town. Their first pit stop is the cake shop. She arranges a small tasting session with Nadine the baker. They spend some time there before they go to the next stop, the flower shop. Vanessa tries to convince them to go to lunch, but the couple insists they head over to the cottage. Vanessa tricks them into one last surprise, which she says is required of them as winners of the contest. It's a dance class and Marilyn is their instructor. Scott rejects the offer as a result of his bad leg, but Amy convinces him to give it a trial. Evan comes in and he looks happy that their plans are going as planned. Scott has a hard time learning his steps. Marilyn suggests that Evan and Vanessa demonstrate to the couple. The duo strikes a beautiful picture as they dance in each other's arms. Scott tries all he can, but he gives up when he almost suffers a fall. Out of annoyance, he steps out for some air to cool off. Evan goes after him and gives him a pep talk on overcoming his fears. This does the magic. They go back inside and the couple perfect their steps. After the dance, Vanessa grabs the door. She claims she has a meeting to attend as she leaves Amy and Scott with Evan for their remaining plan. On their way to the cottage, they discover that the way is blocked, courtesy of Evan and Vanessa. Deciding not to go through the longer route, Amy and Scott decide to leave, as Scott has a flight to catch soon. Well, that's right where Vanessa wants them. Operation Distraction achieved. Evan and Vanessa have drinks to celebrate their hard-won victory. The duo seem to be comfortable with each other and are getting closer by the day. The next morning, Vanessa is faced with more problems. There's a column that needs to be fixed for the wedding and a tree growing into the cottage that needs to be trimmed off. Evan is insistent on not trimming the tree. He has some sentimental value attached to it as it was planted by his grandparents. The sculptor guy has some feelings attached to the cottage after all. But Vanessa convinces him to allow the tree to be trimmed. But he allows it on the condition that they treat the tree as a piece of art. When all's done, Evan keeps a piece of the trimmed tree to himself. Evan is not as non-committal to the cottage as he claims. He seems to have caught the wedding fever as he fixes the column for Vanessa. She sounds excited at his kind gesture and invites him inside to watch Amy and Scott's interview on TV with her. They are all smiles as they watch their favorite couple. Vanessa has high hopes that the interview will boost both her website and book. Vanessa shares that after the wedding, she will be traveling back to NYC and perhaps launch a European version of her book. Evan, on the other hand, talks about staying back in Vermont. It's great news that he finally has a breakthrough courtesy of the trimmed tree branch. Their emotions heat up when their talk progresses to partners. Evan shares that he wasn't looking for one until she showed up in his cottage. Drawn like a moth to fire, the two get closer to each other as they share a sweet and intimate kiss. Their kiss feels natural and their faces are filled with smiles as they separate. Evan kisses her on the cheek before he leaves to continue with his artwork. The next morning, Jill calls Vanessa with some more good news. Their contest and book have garnered attention and a popular magazine will be coming to interview her about the book right there in the wedding cottage. Vanessa is excited about the news. It seems that things are looking up for both her personal life and her business. She visits Evan with his required cup of coffee. He kisses her softly on the lips. A smile spreads all over her face. He shares with her that his artwork is almost ready for the show. Vanessa is hyped on his behalf. She asks to have a sneak peek of it, but he refuses with the claim that it is not ready yet. He asks her out to dinner later and she agrees to it. Her interview with the magazine goes well as expected. The interviewer on her way out sees Evan cycling out of the cottage and recognizes him. Curious to know why he is in the wedding cottage, she finds out from Darryl that he is the owner of the cottage. The reporter takes up the news and publishes it in her magazine. This spells trouble for both Evan and Vanessa later. Vanessa and Evan have an intimate dinner at his favorite restaurant. Their time is interrupted by Darryl and his wife, who are surprised to see them both loved up. After dinner, Evan offers to walk Vanessa to her hotel. They are both surprised when they learn that they're closer to each other now. Talks of life after the wedding pops up and Evan informs her that he is thinking of splitting his time between Vermont and NYC for his show. He refuses her offer of a nightcap with a promise to see each other the next morning. They share a passionate kiss at the doors of the B&B before they part ways. Back at the cottage, Evan receives a call from his art collector, Roland. He excitedly shares with him that his long-awaited artwork is ready for exhibition. But his excitement doesn't last long. Roland has some bad news to share with him. The magazine that interviewed Vanessa ran a story that he is low on cash and currently running the wedding cottage for survival. Roland sounds hurt that he never told him he had financial problems. The news comes as a surprise to Evan. He denies the report and mentions that a reporter was up at the cottage to interview Vanessa earlier on. Roland suspects that it's Vanessa's doing, but Evan doesn't agree with him. But when Roland lays the facts to him at that point, accusing fingers at Vanessa, he starts thinking of Vanessa as the culprit. He is deeply hurt by the perceived betrayal. The next morning, he packs up his things to leave for New York. Vanessa meets him at his car, surprised at the change of his plans. When she asks to see his sculpture, Evan's suspicions get bigger. He congratulates her for a successful magazine publication, and she thanks him but doesn't understand the underlying meaning. She hands him his usual morning coffee and stares at him as he sets out on his journey to New York. His behavior leaves her confused as she has no idea what she did wrong. She is hurt when she learns about the story the magazine published about Evan. She is visibly hurt that Evan thinks she lied against him. All plans to get to him are abortive as he doesn't take her calls nor respond to her emails. Jill calms her down and tells her to give him some time to cool off. Determined, Vanessa resolves to focus on the wedding that is around the corner. Meanwhile, Evan arrives in New York with his sculpture. Roland is wowed when he sees the artwork. Evan is excited at his approval. Vermont was an inspiration, after all. Roland also thinks Vanessa also played a role in it despite whatever thing she did. With the wedding around the corner, Vanessa is in her element making last-minute arrangements. She is shocked when she tries to pay Darryl, but he informs her that Evan already took care of it before he left Vermont. He advises her to discuss things with him since she seems to be unaware of his kind gesture. She tucks the advice away and moves on with the thoughts of the wedding. Meanwhile, Evan's artwork is the talk of the town with offers rolling in for it. He is excited to be at the top of his game once again. After his debacle with Vanessa, he decided to stay back in New York and not return to Vermont. He calls Darryl to help him lock up the cottage after the wedding as he has no plans of attending it. Darryl is surprised at his decision. He mentions his mistake in informing the reporter that Evan was staying in the cottage. This is news to Evan. Finally, Vanessa is vindicated and he doesn't know how to feel, especially after accusing her wrongly. The whole thing was a huge misunderstanding, and Vanessa was forced to bear the fallout. The wedding cottage is up in full swing for the wedding. Vanessa looks resplendent in a powdered blue dress. It's evident that her heart truly lies in planning weddings with the miracle she all but performed on the cottage. Jill advises her to consider continuing with planning weddings and also running her business, who says she needs to choose one. She is all the bride has as she helps a nervous Amy dress up. She lends her a bracelet for something borrowed and the young woman appears ravishing in her wedding dress. The wedding ceremony goes as planned with Amy's grandpa walking her down the aisle. When it's time for the couple's first dance at the after-party, Scott gets nervous and forgets his steps. Vanessa is stunned when Evan steps out of the crowd and sweeps her into his arms and onto the dance floor. They begin to dance and the newly wedded couple follow their lead. Soon enough, Scott remembers his moves and twirls his wife around the dance floor. Vanessa looks content in Evan's arms. He apologizes to her for ever thinking she could betray him. She waves it off, happy that he helped make the couple's first dance a memorable one. In no time, they make up and Vanessa agrees to his idea that they are indeed together. Evan leads her outside to his art piece. Vanessa is overcome with admiration when she catches sight of it. She is stunned when Evan admits that he brought it off the show to where it truly belongs, in the wedding cottage, just like him. He informs her of his decision to stay back in Vermont to continue with his family's business. With the help of Vanessa, who agrees to help him run it, the wedding cottage will be open once more for weddings. The movie ends with the duo sharing a passionate kiss under the skies in the wedding cottage, a great start to their happily ever after.